Do you guys remember when not one camera could do it all? I remember the Canon 5D Mark II. It shot with beautiful color. It shot 1080p, and yet it could only shoot 12 minutes at a time due to its FAT32 filing system. And yet Sony's a7S series, it shot 4K, which was a big deal at that time, and yet the color science completely sucked. It just seemed like whenever you were picking a camera at that point, you always had to compromise. And if you didn't want to have to literally manually sync your audio, you had to buy an expensive piece of software like Pluralize, because free automated syncing was not available in your normal video editing software like Premiere Pro or Final Cut at the time. And I remember 2009, 2010, 2011, in order to put footage from your camera on your computer, you had to use real-time playback in Final Cut 7 or in Avid. And I remember in that same software, you weren't able to have more than one project open at the same time. Times were indeed tough. It's hard to remember the time not too long ago when you had to make sure that you shot smooth and steady footage because Warp Stabilizer didn't exist yet to help you out a little bit in post. And speaking of steady shots, do you remember that time like 6 or 7 years ago before the existence of electronic gimbals, when you only had weighted gimbals, steady cams or glide cams? It took a lot of patience and precision to have to manually adjust the position of the weights perfectly. It took a lot of time, it wasted a lot of time, and it sucked. Do you guys remember before rotor brush existed, and in order to rotoscope things in After Effects, you literally had to animate masks with keyframes individually, frame by frame, and it sucked. I remember this was actually my first experience in After Effects in 2015 for the first time, and boy was it daunting. And guys, I bet you don't remember this. Remember when you had to use DV tape cameras before DSLRs existed? There was no getting just shallow depth of field. That was not available with the unremovable fixed kit lenses that those DV tape cameras had. In order to get shallow depth of field, you had to use photography lenses with your DV cameras by screwing on this crazy looking and loud Lattice 35mm adapter. And I remember them costing like $3,000 back in the day. Who here remembers Magic Lantern? Do you guys remember how stupid limiting DSLRs of back in the day were in regard to their firmware, where you literally had to have an outside third-party firmware like Magic Lantern to break all of these incredible features like uncompressed video files, focus peaking features, intervalometers, or more picture profiles? It was crazy that that was even necessary. And you couldn't just buy an LED like you can today, because LEDs used to flicker, they used to be very underpowered, and they used to cast these really weird green tints. So after my DV tape days, my very first DSLR that I was able to buy was actually the Canon T2i. I bought it for about $700. At the time, it was a revolutionary piece of equipment, but compared to today's standards, some of those specs really sucked. It was really bad in low light, it had bad rolling shutter problems, it had moire, bad artifacts, and in order to shoot 60 frames per second, you had to downgrade from 1080p down to 720p. A few other things, guys. You remember how expensive external hard drives used to be? Like, they're expensive now, but they used to be like twice as expensive. And do you remember having to use external recorders like the Atmos Ninja in order to record ProRes 422 off of your DSLR cameras like the Canon T2i, because again, the firmware that was internal to the camera didn't allow it? Do you guys remember how hard it was to even monitor your exposure on those early video DSLRs like the Canon T2i? You didn't have any zebra lines. You had to literally use the very inaccurate exposure meter down at the bottom of the screen. Hey guys, you remember back in the day when the aerial shot was such a novelty? It's not something you would ever see because you would have to literally rent out a helicopter. And I remember when DJI started introducing these prosumer drones, it was incredible. When you started seeing these aerial shots actually pop up in some of these productions that some of your friends did, it was actually crazy. It looked extremely expensive and people were always impressed. And the thing is, even at the beginning, I remember drones were not as easy to fly as they were now. They were a lot less automated, they were a lot more easy to crash, and they were very expensive to fix. It's actually pretty crazy. Each of these memories really shows us just how far we've come in the industry and just how innovative we had to be back in the day. There's literally no excuse at this point not to leverage today's incredible tech in order to create the most incredible pieces of visual art literally every single day. So to all the oldies in the house, what memories did this video bring up for you?